romance. And so killing characters is something that I do a lot in my own writing, and have a couple different approaches to how we do it.
Ian, tell us a little bit about you, sir.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ian. Ian Everett. I am a editor with Homeworks, which, as Daphne says, has been around since 2022. Been critiquing and writing in Houston a lot longer than that, or at least a decade now. Um, and I like fantasy, I like sci-fi, I like horror, I like killing my characters.
I'd like to point out that I don't like killing my characters.
I think we've had this like eternal like disagreement to like this was about D&D a lot where I'm totally okay with killing my character off, but Daphne refuses and
Do
hates it.
not do not touch my babies.
Yeah.
Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna, or AP Hawkins. I am an editor with Tomeworks, obviously. I write primarily science fiction and fantasy. Um, I also do not like killing my characters, but I recognize that sometimes it has to happen. So, um, yeah. I don't really kill my characters very often, but when it does, it's because it had to happen. So
Hello, Sean.
Hey, how are you guys doing? Setting up the YouTube, casting on there as always, y'all. So much. I enjoy editing and writing here in Houston. As a member of Toneworks, just had a beta session yesterday talking about a novelette that I am writing, and I'm deciding to maybe kill off a character, introduce a brother, and then also potentially kill him off in the end. So. It was very fun talking with the group about one, character deaths, and two, how to make them emotionally resonate. To build up that character's background. In order to have it really hit. So this is a great thing for sci-fi fantasy as far as the genre I kind of goes as well. And on the literary side as well, I'm going to try to have some examples of literary killings off. Although oftentimes that happens before the novel starts, because that will cause characters to have a great, heartache or heartbreak. And that being a character motivation. So that's great for killing characters as well.
So I'm Shannon Winton. I am also an editor with Tomeworks. I started critiquing back around 2010 and moved into editing over a decade ago professionally. I specialize specifically in developmental editing of science fiction and fantasy. And at this point, I've been doing it long enough and well enough that I teach the actual class at the Editorial Freelancers Association on editing science fiction and fantasy. And I am swamped with homework with new editors. So I may be a little less emotive than usual, but I love the idea of killing characters off because of that emotional resonance that Sean was just talking about. But now that I'm sitting here thinking about what I've done in my own writing, and I think I've only killed off one protagonist character. I do kill off secondary characters here and there, but most of the time, if there's a death, there's also a transformation and the character is still around as a ghost, or they are the undead. And then they won't stop bugging you. Because you still owe them money, whether or not they have hands or a wallet that they can pick up to put the money in. But anyway, so it is an interesting topic, especially from the lens of speculative fiction, because death doesn't always mean death. And that's something that we can talk about today as well. Who has our list of questions?
Well, Sean had an interesting one that's good to start out with, which is the what character death gutted you?
I have one. I have one. My favorite character death of all time. It's so sad and so poignant. Boromir in Lord of the Rings, when he dies at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, that's a very like everything leading up to it, he's been tempted by the ring, and he has like failed his test to like, resist this temptation. He's tried to steal the ring from Frodo, and this whole like scene leading up to his death is him doing everything he can to possibly redeem himself after he realized how horribly he failed. And um, and yeah, and then when he dies, he's like um, uh, the first son of the Steward of Gondor. He's like, um, captain, in their army, and he's got the future king of Gondor with him, and it's a very poignant moment between these two, um, men who are kind of like, because throughout the whole like Fellowship of the Ring, he was kind of resistant to, Aragorn and the possibility that he was going to be claiming kingship. Anyway, so yes, yes, it's a very good, very emotional moment at the very end of this book. So that's my favorite one.
What about you, Ian?
Um, I don't know if I've ever really for me, like character deaths are a tool to a good story. So like I don't know if I feel like I'm like, like I felt sad, but like I never like nothing ever has like gutted me, I don't think. And I
All
don't
right, I'm
know.
going to list 2 times that I've been gutted, and both of these are from when I was a kid because I was a relatively precocious reader reading adult, not adult like sexy content, but actually some of it was, but I didn't know that at the time. Going off track, I was reading books that were written for adults that had child characters, and I identified with those characters. The first one that is probably the most well known is Interview with the Vampire, where Claudia is killed because she's a little kid, but trying to also exert herself as an adult because she's around the age of 60, but she's in this little kid body, and she's moving away from her parent figure. They're in France. There's a society of vampires for whom making a child vampire is verboten. And so they feel it's appropriate to destroy her rather than have an eternal life in this body where she can't be an independent person. And they put her basically out in this area that where the sun is going to fall down upon her, and she and her chosen guardian that she is just made into a vampire die in the sunlight. And I think the thing that really hit me really hard was that like the new vampire, the one that was the adult that was supposed to take her, is still so human that she has a form, but the little girl just turns to dust because she's been a vampire for so long. And that threw me. I do not know why, but that like threw me as like a 9-year-old reading this.
What book was that?
Interview with the Vampire.
Okay, yeah.
The way that it happens in, I think the TV show is very different, and the visuals from the movie are very different from the book.
Mhm.
And then another one that you guys will probably not know about, because this shows that I picked a bunch of books up off of my dad's library that were written in like the 70s and earlier. But Gene Wolfe, who you may know the author, he wrote a book series called Soldier in the Mist. And the conceit for that one is that there's a soldier who basically has to appease the gods, but he has a brain injury, so he can't make new memories. So he's essentially got amnesia, and the book is him writing stories to himself because he can't remember one day for the next. So he has to journal what happened so that he can recall and continue on this quest to appease the gods and get his memory back. And he has a little helper. She's a little slave. Her name is Io, and she's just like scamping around, being super helpful all the time. And then in the second book, she disappears, and he doesn't know what happens because there was some sort of battle and he didn't write it down that day.
Oh.
And she's presumed dead. And I just, that destroyed me because she was why I was reading the book.
Oh.
But in both of those cases, it was because I was a self-insert, or I viewed the story through the lens of where I was in my life. Hopefully I don't have main character syndrome and don't know it. But again, both of these books I read before I was the age of 10, and I identified with the children, little girl characters in them. So to see them, die. And I think that, adults who also visualize themselves as a character, when that character dies, I think it has a big impact on them. Because you just put in mortality where they may not have been even reading through the lens of that could be something that happens to them as a real person through this character.
I read books that I was too young to read. I was also a precocious child, but in a completely different direction where I was not exposed to the nature of death in any way. So my death is going to be a little unexpected for me because you guys know that I don't like Game of Thrones, but mine is Eddard Stark from Game of Thrones. And it was such a big death from me, both as like in the story itself and like as a reader, because I didn't think that that could happen, right? We were killing off who was ostensibly the main character of the series. Um, like how does the story go forward from that point if you kill Eddard Stark? And like he's the force of good and rightness in this story and he gets killed. And so for me, it was like turned my world upside down. Um, for what was acceptable in a novel. I stopped reading. That's not
Yeah.
shocking. I stopped reading the series, but yeah, that Eddard Stark still, oh, gets me right there.
My dad was the same with Game of Thrones. He was so upset when Ned died that he just put the book down and never
It
picked it
was
up.
a betrayal of like
Yeah.
everything I knew about fiction for Eddard
Yeah.
Stark to die.
So
And so like
I,
on that note, I will give like J.R.R. Tolkien, not J.R.R. Tolkien, George R. R. Martin like props. I will
yeah,
give him serious props for doing that, but also like, oh, I hate you.
I mean, it worked really well.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
actually this is blasphemy, but do not love George R. R. Martin's books. However, I am absolutely behind him in the fight against AI that he is currently going through. So props to him. You can
I
Give him
write
props. Yes,
I
or
you
not
yes.
write
know
whatever you want, sir. Thank you for
Yeah.
leading the
you
charge.
know that I don't like him as an author and I don't like his stuff and I have lots of reasons for that. But yeah, absolutely props for him, and especially being a big enough name that he can go after it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
Sean.
Well, for deaths, I thought of the Culture series. My high sci-fi, way in the future. My robot minds basically are, spaceships and keep humans as lovely pets, and they create drama, which, robots really love. But my favorite one that I actually cried at was a book that I did not really enjoy. It was like really long, very wordy. It's called Accession. And the one of the main characters is a ship called Sleeper Service. It's already left kind of doing active stuff and it's just kind of like, exploring in empty space for a very long time. So this is a very full of ennui, like nothing really matters to me character, but a um what do they say? Self-replicating goo, which is often a sci-fi baddie kind of thing, is coming to, destroy the universe, and it has a chance to fight it and use literally everything it's got to destroy it. And so this very passive character just goes, you know, balls to the walls and uses everything it has and it destroys itself in the process in order to stop something that is threatening the entire universe. So going from nothing's really a big deal to bam, is one of my favorite, and that's from the end of Accession. Other ones include Surface Detail from the same Culture series, where in the first scene, a main character gets killed, and then you find out that actually there are multiple clones of this character. And so again and again, this character gets killed throughout the novel, but it's like a fun play on, like this is important and kind of the Stark idea of like where in the novel someone dies, and then just this repeats again and again. And a third one, use of weapons, which is a story told from back to forwards in chapters that are marked, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those are interspersed with ones that are in a reverse order. So it starts at, let's say, 12, written in Roman numerals, and then 11, 9, back to the beginning. But basically, it is revealed that the main character's twin brother, I believe, has both been killed and both been killed in a terrible way, and the bones were made into a chair. And so this has featured in the novel and stuff like that. And then it's like, oh my God, at the very end of it, you know. And so that's like another really crazy at the very end, you know, I release of, you know, I how the story has been. And since the story is told backwards in a way, you know, you don't know that this is the character, until the very end.
That's rough.
Yeah, r/the culture, a very good Reddit thread where people discover this about that novel again and again, perpetually, like every few months. And someone going, "Oh my God."
I did remember one that I wanted to. I was reading The Priory of the Orange Tree recently, and there was one that made me go, "Oh man," out loud, and it was Kit when because he's like, just it was one of those things. He's like, one moment he's like just being a cool, goofy little guy, and then like literally the next second he's gone, and it's like one of those almost blink and you miss it deaths at the first second. Which those kinds of deaths always actually do tend to get me.
Well, so that leads into our next question, which was how do you make a death poignant, right? How do you make your readers care? And I think it depends on what kind of death you're going for, right? So if you're doing a horror slasher story, then making characters' deaths poignant may not be as important for, I mean, some of the characters. Some of the characters might be more poignant. Um, but when we're talking about wanting to emotionally gut punch someone, how do you go about doing that?
So we kind of talked about one way, which is like leave the audience with the perception that a death is not possible or reasonable in the scenario that you have created. And by that, I mean, like in the book, like we have presumptions about how story is shaped. And there are ways to see like everybody is safe. Or there are ways to give the false impression that, you know, this person, by dint of being the main character, will always survive, but doing things like letting them get out of precarious situations, or never letting them actually be harmed inside of your conflicts and things like that, where you can lull people into a false sense of security that they are safe with you and they are safe in this story, and then like bam, you hit them and that character is dead. So I mean, I think there are ways that are just in a structural sense that you can build in to give the false sense of security for a character. But one of the things that I find is very poignant is having a life in front of them before you murder them off. And I think that's a good way to set the scene, is that you build in these expectations of what they are going to do after this point in time, or this series of events in the book is done. So it's one of the reasons why, you know, there's that thing where it's just like 2 days from retirement, you know, like you know, there are the plans in the future. Why it's so sad when like the character whose wife just got pregnant gets killed off. Like you give that sense that there is another story for them, even if it's a quieter, more quaint story after whatever they're doing, and that gets cut down. And I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to build in suffering for your audience when you murder off a character, presuming it's a protagonist, not an antagonist.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of like the main reason that Boromir's death for me feels so poignant, is because he does have a life ahead of him. He's looking forward to returning to Gondor and, you know, rejoining the fight against, you know, Mordor's forces. And, you know, the reason that he falls for the temptation of the ring is because he wants to use it to help his people. And so he like has this drive of like what he wants to do and what he wants to return back to, and how he wants to try to save his you know, his city, his kingdom, and that all just like disappears. And it doesn't really disappear because it kind of, you know, transfers over to Aragorn's shoulders at that point. But like Boromir, who like already had the love of the people of Gondor and things like that, like that is gone. And I think that's why his death feels so poignant, is because, you could see this life that was waiting for him. Yeah.
I
I do
think.
love the. Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
go ahead,
please.
Sean. Go ahead.
I do love the inevitable or seemingly invincible. It goes back to what am I thinking? Macbeth and stuff. Where a character really believes that they are invincible, and then their character death like disproves that. Setting up expectations and then knocking them down are one thing, but I also really love, in terms of killing characters, a good death. Like how it happens is just kind of an epic thing, and that sometimes can be a sacrifice or a change in motivation, where someone's bad guy turning to good guy, saving the people that I can go on, or they are an inconsequential character, but they die in an interesting way. We're here in October, in the era of horror movies, but also I love action movies with good deaths as well, where sometimes the act of death itself becomes its own thing, and you can laugh at, like John Wick killing somebody with a pencil, or a horror movie, knocking off a character in an incredibly interesting way. That happens less, I would say, in novels, but it still can be used for sure. The how can be its own interesting thing. You don't typically want to do that with a character that really matters, because that's making a death, out of something that should be inconsequential. But if you split the bad guy straight in half or something with an incredible blow, then that's, that's adding something to it that, if it isn't inconsequential to the character, to the story, can make it, memorable.
So talking about expectations, that's definitely how we talk about, or how we build up to the character death, and you can do it in a couple of different interesting ways. So for example, there's a trope of someone deciding to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, right? I'm gonna go distract the monster, and we know I'm not gonna make it out, but you guys can escape. And that makes death super meaningful. And you're like, okay, well, I'm sad that they died, but like it was a meaningful death. And so the gut punch comes from when you subvert that expectation. So if anyone has ever watched Kong Skull Island, um, fantastic movie. They're on this island. There's a lot of monsters. They're getting chased by monsters. So one of the guys, in this like great heroic moment, he straps a bunch of grenades to him, and he's like walking toward the monster, like, oh, come get me, come get me. Um, so everyone else can escape. And the monster swats him to the side, and he explodes on the side of a mountain. Completely wasted death. And it just killed me. Like, this isn't even a main character, right? But like, just killed me, because like he sacrificed himself, and in the end, it meant nothing, nothing at all. And so it subverted the expectation of that trope of someone dying the good death, right? And having it be so meaningless. And I think meaningless deaths always hit me harder than meaningful deaths. And I think that treating them in a way where how they die is like almost an afterthought, right? It's Ian's example from the beginning of like, it's just like a one sentence, like, throw, they died.
Mhm.
And that's it. Like, you don't get this long drawn out death scene where they get to say their last words or anything. Like those ones that come out of like left field and just get you. Those are hard.
I think the death not on your own terms is definitely something that a lot of us wrestle with, thinking about in real life. And so to see that displayed inside of your literature, forces you to confront that fear that you almost instinctively have, about your own mortality, and then whether or not there's more that's pointless than just the death. And I think that's one of the reasons why that kind probably lingers with you and a lot of other readers. Ian, you actually like killing off your characters, so I'd love to hear what you think about this, since
Yeah.
your old hat at it.
Yeah, I think there's two reasons you kill a character generally, and one is for like that kind of like, not like necessarily gritty realism, but just to ramp up tension, to set stakes, to be like, yeah, people die. People, this story is dangerous, especially if you're doing some sort of story where there is combat involved. Um, People die. So like that's the whole idea. And then the other time that you want to have a character die is when there's going to be a lot of emotional impact from their death on, I feel like, other characters. You want them to from that point forward haunt the narrative, as they call it a bit. Some people call it that by a character that died like ahead of time. But to think about talking about Game of Thrones with Ned Stark, um he dies at the end of book one. That's devastating. A lot of people drop the book, but the subsequent books are absolutely haunted by the fact that he died, and a lot of the story is shaped by that fact. And I think that's a really good example of like the best case scenario of why you should kill a character.
Yeah, I mean, narratively, killing Eddard Stark was the right idea. I'm just a betrayed reader.
I can't remember, Anna, if you've had to talk, but this reminds me of one other thing that we haven't said, and so I'm sorry if I'm speaking over you. But one of the things that you can do to frame the death to be more impactful is to lay in surprising visuals that are hard for the reader to get out of their head. And one of the things that I'm thinking about that I've seen produced more and more is the crabs eating the bodies on the beach. I think I first read that about 5 years ago. Y'all seem surprised, but
I have never heard this before. Please.
well, okay, so generally what I've read, the body is murdered in some way or fashion. The crabs don't kill them. But the way the body is treated by being eaten by crabs is something that people just do not think about. And then they have a visual of, usually it's blue crabs just like coming up and devouring the body on the beach. And the first place that I read this was in a detective novel. And the rest of the detective novel I was like not super duper into. But I have seen it more and more in both detective shows and now in science fiction and fantasy shows, because that has shown up in the new Aliens TV show in one section. And so this really bizarre, unexpected visual of a body being like pinched apart by crabs that we just not, even in your like fever dreams is probably not something that you popped up in your own head. Is slowly manifesting itself through our culture. And it hasn't hit you guys yet, but I'm just paying a lot of attention because I was like, ugh.
That's super interesting.
But yeah, no, but I mean, I've seen it. I feel like True Detective did one where they put the crabs in the barrel with the body and they ate it. Is that the right show? There was a show where that happened. It may not be True Detectives. And then now again, I'm seeing it in Alien. So like, it's not like everybody is on the street corner being like crabs bodies, but it is something that I'm seeing becoming a trend and gross out body horror because of what is happening to the dead body. And so providing like that bizarre or unexpected visual is something that will like keep that element in the reader's head far after they finish the story.
It's an interesting idea because as a biologist, I don't find that visual odd. That's just nature. But it's the idea of like, no matter who you were in life or what you did in life, nature is not going to show any reverence to your corpse. And so it's just that idea of, anyone could die and, end up in the ocean and get eaten by crabs, there's, no matter how much, reverence people place on their dead, nature does not place the same reverence on the dead.
So this is a much more niche.
A modern take on crows picking at bodies, right? Like it's, we're so familiar with that visual of like crows picking at dead bodies that like maybe it's not as impactful anymore. So like the suddenness of, oh, but it's crabs. Like maybe that's cool of it.
I think I'm focusing in on like the thing that eats the body, but also just like the general things that can happen to your body that you don't expect to see. And this is a much more niche example, but one of the things that happen, and I think it's in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but it was one of the spaghetti westerns, is they show a lot of motifs of ants. There's like kids playing with the ants at the very beginning, and the ants eat the dead bodies. And when you roll the body over, there's ants covering it. And that actually started showing up in Hollywood films more and more, where like the ants are representations of death, because it was such a shocking, a shocking thing for the audience at the time. And it's fallen out of favor. Maybe it should come back. But just, yeah, like the visuals of how the dead body is treated, or what the dead body looks in decomp, those things do kind of stick with us a little bit more, because we can't get that visual out of our head. And I don't know what to say, man, because yeah, of course,
I
biology
mean,
is
and that's
biology.
good place to horror with, dead bodies coming back very much, like that decomposition,
Yeah.
coming back at you.
So
Yeah.
Shannon,
I do like a good body horror visual. That's
Mhm.
that's kind of like if and I mean, you guys have read my stuff. Like when I show death, or if I show, if I want to really kind of like shock the reader or make them think like, hey, this is really weird what's happening. We're gonna have some body horror in there. I like a good drowned corpse, or coming to life and talking to someone, or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of like when I'm forced to confront death in my fiction, there's going to be some body horror in there.
Hmm.
it's interesting talking about the crabs being like the indifference of nature, because humans put a lot of stock in how we treat our bodies after death. And that brings me to another gut punch killing that, like, it shouldn't be surprising that this happened, because this is a very, 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 very old piece. But Hector dying in the Battle of Troy.
Hmm.
So he battles Achilles, Achilles wins, and then he proceeds to desecrate the shit out of his body, drags him behind a chariot all around the city walls, where the Greeks believed that your body had to remain intact in order to have a peaceful afterlife. And so by dragging him around, he's just like shredding his body all across the plain, so he will never have peace in the afterlife. And Hector is like the good guy of the Battle of Troy, right? He had nothing to do with Paris stealing Helen. He has a wife and a kid, and he's just like the moral upstanding dude who's just trying to protect his city, and like that's how he goes. Um, and so yeah, I hadn't thought about how the bodies being treated after would affect how the death works, but like if he just died in battle, that wouldn't have been nearly as bad. It was what happened afterwards.
Yeah. That's a really good one to bring up, because it shows that this has been a utilized tactic forever.
Mhm.
But this also brings up another question, because we've kind of like, now we've touched on body horror, and we talked about a few places where you've seen it. And I focused on mysteries, I focused on Westerns. I mean, we presume body horror and aliens. But is there a difference between how you frame death based upon the genre you're writing in?
Death in romance is very different from death in horror for sure. But probably, I mean, I think that there's a midway, but like, so horror is generally going to be pretty gruesome in terms of death. And romance goes almost pure tragedy. Even when you're not talking about killing a POV character, which is another question we should address, right? So if you're talking genre romance, you can't really kill off either of your POV characters, at least not permanently, because they have to be around for the happily ever after. But if you do kill off a character, it's almost always this like huge tragedy, and it needs to be treated with reverence. Um, I have seen ones where they've killed off the POV character, not permanently again, but that actually really affected me. Anna and I both read this book called The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy. And the main male lead dies in it, and not permanently. And we know it's not permanent because this is a romance and they're not going to do that to us. But it still was tear-jerking, because so much of the book is about their beliefs in the afterlife. And he had a very like meaningful death. And like if he had stayed dead, it still would have been a beautiful story. It wouldn't have been a romance, but it still would have been a beautiful story. But like his body being like prepared for burial after death was one of the most like tear-jerking scenes that I have read in a very long time.
Yeah, it was very sad. I cried too. It was sad.
And we knew he was coming back. Like
We knew he was coming
would come
back. Yeah. We knew he was coming back. We knew it wouldn't last forever, but it was very, very sad.
Oh, because the author did a really good job of showing you the character's grief alongside it. And so you were feeling this woman's grief as she's preparing her dead boyfriend's body for burial. You're feeling her grief very hard right next to her, even as you're like clinging to this, like, no, he can't stay dead.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think you know, it's interesting because like I guess in some genres, right, we know that death is going to be permanent. Like if you're reading like contemporary fiction, even like, contemporary romance, if there's a death, that's probably going to be a permanent thing. Anything that's like, literary fiction, real world type of stuff. But in speculative fiction, there's always this idea that death is not necessarily permanent. And so characters who die, they can come back in a multitude of different ways. Whether it's like, physically they come back and they are like resurrected somehow, or they come back as like a ghost, or, their death creates some sort of like magical energy that's important to the rest of the story, and the only reason it exists is because they died. So like, uh, I do think like with speculative fiction, in terms of dealing with death and framing death, um, if you're trying to do like a permanent death, you have to kind of handle that a little bit differently than one that is not necessarily permanent. Um, because like a death where like that character is like totally gone and he's never coming back, or he or she is never coming back, um uh can definitely impact the reader a lot differently than one where there's this chance that the character might come back. So I think you can get more emotional oomph. I mean, like Daphne's example, like we knew the character was coming back, and that still had a lot of emotional oomph. But I think like, um, in a lot of cases, if there is some indication to the reader, to the other characters that like this death is permanent, you can milk it a lot more for that emotional gut punch than if there's a chance that this character is going to come back.
You brought up literary, and that makes me think of Lincoln in the Bardo, by George Saunders. And I debate if he is speculative or literary, but because of his themes, he fits into literary. But he does things like, write short stories about, brain modification devices and rather speculative things. But Lincoln in the Bardo is a book about Abraham Lincoln. His young son passes away, and over the course of a night, Lincoln is in the Bardo, which is like a purgatory in Buddhist philosophy, and him kind of staying in the afterlife with the ghosts and trying to come to terms with his son's death. And very much this is, a meditation for the entire book on death, where it takes place, in a fantasy realm essentially. But yeah, very much in literary fiction, it's going to be a quieter death, more similar to romance. And there, in a purgatory sense, is not a hope of this person coming back to life, but maybe they move on, and so that would be my kind of another speculative way of doing it. Can this soul come to rest? Which is used in other versions of speculative fiction as well.
So I'm gonna, make the point from the suspense and mystery side of things, and it really does depend on how much detail the genre or the subgenre that the story is in calls for. Sean, I want to make sure you were done with your point before I. Okay. But so like suspense, they may focus in on the most graphic details, but they're not going to linger the way you might with body horror. So, you know, if the character's eyes are milky, or if they have like the garroting things on them, or if there's stuff that's clues to who the actual big bad is, those are going to be there. Like if there's a calling card, essentially, for recognizing that this is one of the victims of a particular murderer or syndicate or whatever. Whereas with mystery, these things are going to be described in a slightly different way if it's a police procedural versus if it's a cozy versus if it's something else. Because the police procedural will state these things, but in very crisp terms, and it's not going to linger, and a cozy won't mention them at all. Because the goal for both of these genres is very different, even though they're both mysteries. Same with suspense. Suspense is supposed to scare you as a reader. Whereas procedural mystery is supposed to be about justice, generally speaking, and the cozy is supposed to be fun. So
Twisted deaths are always off screen, or at least usually off screen, and tend to be very clean.
yeah. And if there is a
Hmm.
calling card, it'll be like one of the few things that is noticed, like, oh, I see, you know, this tattoo of a rose on their arm or whatever. And the other victim had a tattoo of a rose. So maybe these are, you know, people in the same kind of a family, or you know, that were in the same sorority, and they're the victims that are being focused on. But it won't be like there is a credit card lodged in this person's throat. You know, like it won't be the same ghastliness to it.
I think for
I'm in terms of cozies, I'm thinking of well, sorry, Ian, did you want to say something?
no, it's good. You can go ahead.
In terms of cozies, I'm thinking about my what is it, bookshops and bone dust, and kind of those things. Where even at that, it is you know, fantasy realm, but you know, and one of the main characters, is a fighter, and yet you know, like the only fight is with a big bad, and it's at the very end, and it happens. It just kind of like wisps away. They solve it through questions, you know, through trickery instead of through brawn.
I just finished Bookshops and Bone Dust like this morning.
Isn't it so good?
It's so good, and we will have a full discussion of it later.
I still need to read.
But Bookshops and Bone Dust, absolutely great. New book comes out November 11th. Anyway, so what Bookshops and Bone Dust did, which is something we haven't talked about, which is undeath and how not dying can sometimes be worse. Especially when you're talking about speculative fiction, characters who cannot die sometimes will make you think that, oh, that's so much worse than an early death. I feel like Ian, who also loves. Oh, Ian, if you have thoughts, please.
No, I mean, I was just gonna try and speak to it from like things I worked on, because I worked on like superhero stuff and dystopian stuff, and I think deaths in those kinds of stories serve like a really different purpose. Dystopian, you're just trying to like get across the point that this place sucks, you know.
Marvel characters, I always give Marvel examples, but the many deaths and undeaths of Loki
Yeah, like
are
superhero
such an
stuff.
example.
Death is a toggleable aesthetic more than anything else.
Just the tally of deaths.
Yeah.
Um, so I know we've got like 10 more minutes, but I do want to talk about one of the questions we still have left that is very important to me is killing your main character. How do you do it? How do you do it well? And how do you do it without your whole fan base destroying you? Because that's what happened with the Divergent series. The last book, she killed off Triss, her main character. And I have never seen a fandom turn so ferociously as what happened there. Like there is not really a Divergent fandom anymore because of this. It was such a scandal.
This is kind of funny because I use this as an example for both characterization and plot inside of the class that I teach, like how you bone something. So I want to keep quiet because I do have a lot of feelings, but Daphne, this is a really good point, because you can certainly isolate yourself from your audience, and you can make them mad enough that they want vengeance, essentially, for what you've done. And this author it took her like 15 years to be like, well, maybe I handled it a little bit wrong, but for a long time,
She doubled down so hard.
yeah.
And like from a creative perspective, sure, yeah, you do you, it's your story. You can and do whatever you want. But from a honestly, the biggest problem she had was that she was writing YA. And the genre expectations for YA do not include your main character dying.
But I mean, there are times where it does. It's just you had to be back in like the 1990s.
Mm,
But and I said I wasn't going to talk a lot, but I think there's certain things that happen. We've sort of talked about a few of them, where she did the things that we've said, hey, this is what you do, but she did them wrong. So, she treated this as a castaway death. Like the character hit a point where she felt like they ascended to where they could volunteer themselves to die. Even like the entire series was a journey. Of her becoming adult enough to make the decisions to put herself in these situations. But then she didn't actually die in a way where she's like, oh, y'all live and I'll stay back here and fight. She had a throwaway death and the audience felt insulted. And I think what they did is they took this group of activities and essentially said, like, you're disrespecting the character who we love. And I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah, I think if you're going to kill your main character, I think that in order to avoid all of this, right? In order to avoid, completely alienating your audience, I think you have to do two things. The first being your audience has to kind of see that death coming. They have to, you don't have to like, outright tell them like, hey, this character is going to die, but you have to plant the seeds in the narrative that gets them thinking well before it happens that I don't know if this person's going to survive this. Um, and you don't want to like crush all of their hope because that might make them stop reading. You want them to still have hope that the character will survive, but you want them to be thinking about the fact that that character might die. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing is the death of your main character, in my opinion, it has to be meaningful. You can't just let your main character die in a throwaway moment that means nothing. It has to have some sort of meaning to the rest of the characters in the book. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah,
I think part of it has to.
I'm gonna add a third one, which is I think that you have to get to a point where your readers agree with your character that this is necessary and there's no other way.
Mhm.
Because if your readers are looking there yelling at them, being like, but you could just do this, they're always gonna be mad about it. Like
Yeah.
I might not like it if my main character dies, but if I like agree in the end that yeah, like in the same situation I would have made the same decision, then I can at least respect them for it.
Mm.
I'm going to add just like a slightly different spin on what Anna said. You set the tone of your story throughout. So if you have not set the tone that this is a tragedy, then when it comes out that this is a tragedy, the readers are going to feel suckered or hoodwinked. And I think that's one of the reasons why we get, mad at certain things because it's like, yoink, it wasn't a story of hope all along. But there's a lot of stuff that's dystopia, where like everybody is at risk for death because life is just as bad, if not worse. And if somebody dies, it's part of the expectation that this is in the realm of possibilities in this universe because that's the universe we live in. So if you're saying like this is a story of hope, or this is, the man crawling out of the hole, and the expectation is that yes, they're going to have the ups and downs, but we expect the up to be where it ends. And then you subvert that, but don't give us some other indication of how this is actually a positive, then I think that makes people more mad too.
I'll go back to my first example of Accession, which is very contemplative as far as a sci-fi novel goes, but has this looming big bad that's going to try and take over the universe. And in terms of killing the main character, one, it's a robot, so you care less about it. Two, the Culture series is very interesting in that it does not have a through line. It happens all in the same universe, but it is at different times that can be, hundreds of years apart in some cases. And none of the other ones, I would say, feature that main character dying. So one, you don't expect it when it happens. Two, it really turned it from this book is kind of slow and yada yada to, oh my God, that ending was so good that I'm rating that book highly because, if you can slog through 450 pages, then you're like, wow, okay, that was really good, a really good ending. It made up for it. But it's few and far between that you can get away with doing it. It has to be justified. In this case, it was talking about literally saving the universe. And so you can kill off your main character, and that's a very good high impact way of doing it. Yeah, multi POV and justifying why you guys had great point.
I think it'd be a really interesting exercise if you've had a single POV the whole time and you kill them off at the end and don't elaborate on what happens after.
I think that would make a lot of people mad.
Oh God, would it? But if you can do that shit with literary. You can do that shit with literary.
Okay, this is true. That's true. You can.
You can drown. You can absolutely drown. And actually, I did read. You are reminding me. I did read one book that ended up. The whole thing takes place in a prison. And it's telling the story of the murder that this bad guy did or something when he was drunk. It was an accident, basically. But it's him being really messed up in prison, and then the end of it is him, going to be executed, and that's boom, the end of it. But yeah, very literary, very dreary. Takes place in 1800s New England, so it all is
That kind of reminds me a little bit of I mean, I don't know if anyone's talked about A Tale of Two Cities, but the ending where, I mean, that's kind of, I feel like, textbook how you do it. He gets to die redeeming himself, doing something for others. Not really, can't do it worse than that, I don't think. Or can't do it better than that, sorry. Whoops.
We could certainly get worse.
Yeah.
We can
Whoops.
talk about bad deaths all day.
Yeah.
Any last questions? As we have a little time.
I know we've it's not a question, it's just a comment. I know we've talked about Ned Stark several times, and I know that a lot of people were, including Daphne, were very affected by his death. But I like I hated it. I didn't like it. But I think that the reason why it didn't affect me quite as strongly is because I kind of saw it coming. I didn't want it to happen. I didn't want it to happen. I hoped that he would figure out a way to get through it. But the pieces were kind of there. He's this very rigidly good guy going up against these very compromising, evil people. And, the only way that he could have gotten out of dying is if he bent his rigid principles in a way that he found abhorrent, and he wasn't going to do that. And so I kind of saw his death coming. And so when it happened, like obviously I was upset and gutted, but I wasn't like put the book away gutted.
Yeah.
So, because I like that was like the worst case scenario that I was envisioning as I was reading up to that point, and then it happened. So,
One thing we haven't talked about that we have 1 minute to discuss is when you kill off your villains and like how to make it both effective and like get the audience to cheer and have it be fulfilling that this person or creature or whatever that they've been rooting against this entire time has finally got their comeuppance. How do you make that work?
I
You
mean,
each have 10 seconds.
that's really one you can't do off screen, right? We can't do Hitler in a bunker for that one. You've got to see it happen.
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
I think the way that you bone that is by changing the characteristics of the villain, who has presumably up to this point either matched or exceeded the capabilities of your protagonist. If you make them a bumbler so that they can be killed off, I think that really destroys the enjoyment of that part of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got to be bested. It's
Yeah.
got to be earned.
The final fight with the villain, the final showdown, whatever it is, it has to be a hard fought victory. Like Daphne said, it has to be earned, because if it doesn't feel like it's earned, then it's like, what was the point?
And to the
Yeah, I agree
cozy
with that.
point, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say I agreed completely with Anna and Daphne here.
To the cozy point, it does not have to be with brawn. It can be with brains to make it justified.
It can be a situation where, especially if you're talking about YA, where they kill themselves, right? Where it's their own hubris or whatever, their crazy invention, death ray. When the hero destroys it, it kills them, right? Where if you want your characters to remain relatively bloodless in this, there are ways to kill them off without your character being directly involved.
That's a good point. Like where you destroy the innocence or goodness of your protagonist is also another way to really bork villain death.
It's the Batman thing of like, well, Batman's gotta try and save him at the end, but
Mhm.
you still want to kill the villain.
Or like
But-
where the villain, gets pushed off a cliff or something and he dies that way. But it still feels earned because, the main character, they had this big like showdown right before it and, whatever. And the villain is still this like big bad scary guy. But then the characters are not directly responsible for his death.
Disney deaths. That's
Yeah.
definitely the Disney
Yeah,
deaths.
Yeah.
Ryan brought up one in the chat as well, and he was talking about earned deaths, I do believe, and brought up Sidious. I don't know that one. Anybody know
from
Sidious?
Stormlight Archive, I think.
It is
Yeah.
not.
Ryan, if you want to unmute, feel free to spoil it for us.
Okay, obviously spoilers, but this is almost an anticlimactic death in that it is essentially the narrative telling this character, you're not the main villain anymore, and removing his plot armor, because what happens is he is having a conversation with one of the heroes. They're alone, and he's goes on the big motive rant about why he's doing this and on, kind of playing the little finger angle. And then the hero just pulls a knife and stabs him to death on the spot. This happens like 10 pages from the end of the book, after the climax.
Bathos, and this is the bad guy getting hit by a train. It's a huge fight, and then all of a sudden he wanders, like, I'll get you, and gets smashed by a train. Like, oh my, this is playing with Bathos. I'm not exactly sure if that's a great death.
Yeah, like it's a significant character moment for the hero doing it, because like this is the first time you really see him lose his temper and just decide he's gonna kill a guy on the spot. But
yeah.
I mean, in that case, though, it is a super significant death because of the impact on him.
Well, and also it's not just like he's pissed. It's like this guy has been threatening his family the whole time. It's kind of showing the lengths this character would go to protect his family and his close loved ones.
But the lesson being, don't let yourself get caught monologuing, because the hero will stab you.
The hero will just stab you.
No monologuing.
All right, y'all, we are almost 5 minutes over. I think we actually left a few of the questions we had on our Discord back there, so we may have to come back and discuss this again another time. But Sean, tell us what we're going to be doing next week after Halloween.
Yeah, we're going west. So in terms of American regionalism, I did the first half last month, talking about different ways that like New England and Florida and different places have kind of regional fictional trends involving setting, involving character, involving I kind of like an ethos going back to religion, ethnicity, and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And then now we have passed the Mississippi, so we got up basically to the old Midwest up to Chicago, and we'll be talking about Texas and the West after that.
So you can find us right now at Houston Independent Authors on Eventbrite and Meetup, and sign up there. Yeah. And if you want to find us on YouTube, Shauna, remind us what our link there is. That'll help you find previous writers' lunches, and you can watch them at your leisure.
It is
Yeah, it should be
YouTube.
at Writers Lunch. My it's youtube.com/at Writers Lunch. I am almost certain, but I'm not going to navigate away from this page in case that cuts off the recording.
Let me get it for you.
And if you're in our Discord server, I'm gonna get all of the events for November up in the next today and tomorrow. I have 2 days. So I'll get all the November events up in the Discord so that y'all can see them there. We have at least one person who has planned a couple of write-ins for November, kind of tangentially to the Tomeworks and the science fiction fantasy meetups. I'll have those in the Discord as well for y'all. But if anyone is looking to do write-ins in November, we can do them virtually on our Discord or in person if you're in Houston. So definitely be on the lookout for that, or look at planning some yourself if you want those for sure.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
All right, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.